She found out where Imani lived in 11 minutes. That was the part that never made the news. That was the part Yoon Seola was proudest of. Not the access she bought, not the legal language she weaponized, not the months of surveillance she conducted from 3 different cities. 11 minutes. That was all it took to locate a woman who thought she had disappeared. A woman who had changed her phone number, paid cash for her lease, told only 2 people on Earth where she was going. Seola sat in a rented car on a Wednesday afternoon, parked half a block from a Seattle crosswalk, and watched Imani Rochelle Mercer carry groceries up the front steps of a building that wasn't supposed to exist on any file connected to Seo Kang-hyeon's world. She watched her struggle with a paper bag and her coat and the weight she was carrying beneath that coat, and Seola felt something move through her chest that she would have called satisfaction if she were honest with herself. She wasn't honest with herself. She called it justice. She pulled out her phone and typed 4 words into a message draft she had been composing for 6 weeks. Pregnancy looks beautiful on you. She didn't send it yet. That wasn't how this worked. Timing was everything. She had learned that from Kang-hyeon himself, watching him run an empire for years from a position where no one knew she was watching. She understood patience better than most people understood their own names. She saved the draft, started the engine, and drove away. Imani never saw the car. Baset. If you've ever loved someone so much, it turned into a mistake. If you've ever made a decision you told yourself was selfless and spent years wondering if it was actually just control dressed up in sacrifice, then this story is going to sit with you. Subscribe to this channel right now and hit that notification bell, because we release stories like this every week, and you don't want to walk into the middle of one. Drop a like if you're already feeling something, and tell us in the comments what city or country you're watching from. We want to know how far this story travels. Now stay with us, because what happens next at that crosswalk is going to change everything. So, the light had been green for 4 seconds when Kang-hyeon's driver stopped the car. Not because of traffic, not because of anything Kang-hyeon had said. The driver, a quiet man named Park, who had worked for him for 9 years and understood instinctively when to stop asking questions, simply felt the shift in the back seat and touched the brake. Kang-hyeon was leaning forward. His hand had risen without him deciding to raise it, fingers pressed flat against the cold glass of the passenger window, and he was staring at the crosswalk in front of them with the expression of a man who has just seen something that cannot be real. She was crossing left to right, dark coat, groceries in a paper bag held against her chest with both arms because the handles had given out or she didn't trust them. A gray knit cap pulled low over her ears. She was watching the street the way people watch streets in cities they don't entirely trust yet. Not paranoid, but aware. Careful. Imani. 34 years old, his ex-wife for 4 months and 11 days. The woman he had signed divorce papers for in a conference room with a view of Elliott Bay while telling himself it was the right thing to do for her. The woman he had not contacted once in those 4 months and 11 days, because that was the promise he made to himself when he made the choice for both of them. She looked different, stronger somehow, more settled inside herself. The way people look when they've stopped waiting for something and started building something else instead. And she was pregnant. Visibly, unmistakably, impossibly pregnant. Kang-hyeon's hand stayed against the glass. His brain had stopped processing everything except that coat, that cap, that silhouette crossing in front of his car in the gray November afternoon, like a fact he hadn't been given permission to know yet. Park said nothing. The light changed. Kang-hyeon got out of the car. He didn't tell Park to follow. He didn't reach for his phone or his jacket or think about whether he was wearing the right shoes for whatever was about to happen. He simply opened the door and stepped out into the cold and called her name before he had finished deciding whether that was a good idea. Imani. She stopped. Her back was to him. Her shoulders went rigid in a way that wasn't surprise. It was recognition, and the kind of recognition that comes with a cost already being calculated. She stood there for 2 full seconds before she turned around, and when she did, her face was completely composed. That composure hit him harder than anything else. Kang-hyeon. Her voice was even, neutral. She said his name the way someone says the name of weather. He crossed the street toward her. He was aware of how he looked. Long coat, the kind that said money without announcing it. The stillness in his posture that 9 years of running a criminal organization had built into his bones. He watched her register all of it and refused to be moved by any of it, and something in his chest pulled tight. You're... He stopped, started again. When did you... 7 months. She answered the question he hadn't finished because she had apparently decided they weren't doing the version of this conversation where he danced around it. Give or take. The doctor says give. 7 months. He did the math without wanting to. 7 months ago, they had still been married. 7 months ago, they had still been living in the same house, sleeping in the same bed, existing in the same carefully maintained distance that he had spent 2 years building between them, because he had decided without consulting her that distance was safer than closeness for a woman married to a man like him. 7 months ago, she had been carrying his child and he hadn't known. Imani. He said her name differently this time, not calling her back. More like trying to find the beginning of a sentence. Don't, she said quietly. Don't what? Whatever that voice means. That voice you use when you're deciding how to manage something. She shifted the grocery bag against her chest. I don't need to be managed. I wasn't... You were already doing it. She wasn't angry. That was the thing that made it worse. She was just accurate. The way you said my name just now, you were already calculating. He closed his mouth. Around them, Seattle moved like Seattle always moves in November. Purposeful and cold and largely indifferent to human drama. 2 men in rain jackets walked past without looking up. A bus exhaled at the corner. Somewhere behind him, Park had presumably found somewhere to park the car and was probably making a phone call he hadn't been asked to make. Is it mine? Kang-hyeon said. It came out flatter than he intended. A question that sounded like a statement. Imani looked at him for a long moment. The gray afternoon sat between them. Yes, she said. He exhaled. It wasn't relief exactly. It was more like the moment when a building you've been watching starts to move, the long, slow recognition of structural change that cannot be undone. Why didn't you tell me? Because you weren't my husband anymore. We were still married when I found out you had already decided we were done. She said it without heat. Just the facts, laid down like they weighed nothing. You signed those papers in March. I found out in February. I spent 2 weeks trying to figure out how to tell you, and then you called me into that conference room and put a pen in my hand. She paused. So I took the pen. He didn't have an answer for that. He deserved not to have one. Where are you living? He asked instead. That's not information you need. Imani, it's not. She adjusted the groceries again, and he watched her wince slightly at the weight, and every instinct he had trained over 2 decades of operating in controlled, dangerous situations told him to reach for that bag. He kept his hands where they were. I have a place. I'm fine. Everything is fine. You're carrying my child alone in a city where people know my name. I'm carrying my child, she said, in a city where I live, and your name doesn't have anything to do with me anymore. That's not accurate? She looked at him steadily. Pick a different word. He looked at her face, the composure that hadn't broken once since she turned around, the patience underneath it that was entirely different from the patience he had trained into himself. Hers wasn't about control. It was about having made her peace with something and refusing to let him unmake it. Where are you going right now? He said. Home. Let me walk with you. She was quiet for a moment. Then, 1 block? He fell into step beside her. They walked in silence for half that block before she said, without looking at him, You look tired. I'm fine. You always say that. Because it's usually true. It wasn't always true. She said it lightly, like an observation about the weather. You used to say it when you hadn't slept in 3 days. You used to say it right before you disappeared for a week and came back with a different energy and never explained where you'd been. He didn't respond. I'm not trying to start something, she said. I'm just remembering out loud. They reached her building. It was modest, 4 stories, brick face, the kind of building that cost more than it looked because of the neighborhood, not the amenities. She stopped at the front steps and turned to face him. This is me, she said. Can I come up? No. No hesitation, no softening of it. Imani, we need to talk about what the plan is. She tilted her head slightly. I have one. The baby has a pediatrician. I have an OB. I have a job that accommodates my schedule. I have savings. She listed these things the way someone reads a grocery list, complete, practical, slightly tedious to have to say out loud. I'm not behind on anything. That's not what I meant. I know what you meant. She looked at him. You meant you need to understand the situation so you can figure out how to organize it, how to keep it safe. A pause. How to control it. He said nothing. The answer is no, she said. Not to the bodyguards, not to the surveillance, not to whoever Park is probably calling right now on the corner back there. She glanced over his shoulder briefly. Not to any of it. I'm not your territory anymore. You made me feel like I was. She said it quietly. Not accusing. Reporting. For most of our marriage, I felt like something you were protecting instead of someone you were living with. And I understand why. I do. But understanding why something happened doesn't mean I want to walk back into it. The grocery bag was clearly getting heavy. He watched her shift it again and did not reach for it. I'm going to be in this child's life, he said. I know. I want to be. I know that too. Something moved across her face. Not quite softness, but something adjacent to it. Something old. I never planned on keeping him from you. Him. He processed that in the space of a breath. A son. You know the sex. 22 weeks ago. A ghost of something crossed her mouth. Almost a smile. He was very cooperative at the ultrasound. Kang-hyeon stood on the sidewalk in front of his ex-wife's building in the gray November cold and understood for the first time in 4 months that the thing he had been managing in the clean, controlled conference room in March had not actually been managed at all. He had only managed himself. He had organized his own exit, folded it into a story about protection and sacrifice, and walked away from something that had kept growing without him. I'd like to call you, he said. Just not to manage anything. I'd like to be able to call. She considered him for a moment. Once a week, she said. Tuesdays, before 8. Okay. And Kang-hyeon. She put one hand on the door. If I find out there are people watching this building, the number changes. If I find out Park is running any kind of check on me, the number disappears. She held his gaze. I mean that. I know you do. Do you believe it? He thought about it honestly. Not about what she was saying, about whether he was capable of being the version of himself she was asking for. I'm going to try, he said. She looked at him for one more moment, then she went inside. He stood on the sidewalk and watched the door close. Behind him, Park had pulled the car up to the curb. He could hear the engine idling. He could hear his own phone vibrating in his coat pocket. 4 times in the last 3 minutes, which meant something needed his attention. He stood there anyway. 7 months. A son. A woman who had spent the end of their marriage learning how to need him less, and somewhere between the signing of the papers and this gray November crosswalk had apparently succeeded. He walked back to the car. Park didn't ask anything. That was what 9 years got you. Back to the office, Kang-hyeon said. Yes, sir. They pulled into traffic. Kang-hyeon looked at his phone. 3 messages from his security chief, Young Hae-won, and a missed call from his attorney. He put the phone face down on the seat. He stared out the window at Seattle moving past. His son. He had a son who was 7 months along and already had a pediatrician and a cooperative ultrasound history, and the mother of that son was living in a building on a street he had just memorized without meaning to, and she had eyes that watched the street the way someone watches a street when they're already expecting something to come from it. That part lodged in him. The wariness in her. Not from him. He had seen how she looked at him, and it was complicated, but it wasn't fear. It was something else. Something older. Something that had been sitting behind her eyes when she turned around in that crosswalk and recognized his voice. She had already been scared before she saw him. That night, Hae-won called at 11. I can have a full workup on the building by morning, Hae-won said. He didn't ask what building. He already knew. Lease history, surrounding. No, Kang-hyeon said. Silence. She asked me not to, Kang-hyeon said. I told her I wouldn't. With respect, Hae-won. Another silence, shorter. Yes, sir. He hung up and sat in the dark of his home office and thought about a woman crossing a street with groceries and the particular kind of alertness in her that didn't belong to November cold or pregnancy discomfort. It belonged to someone who was already being watched by someone else. He pulled up a legal file on his laptop. Not her lease, not her movements, not anything that touched her directly. His own records, his own structures. The architecture of the empire he had built and the people who had orbited it over the years. He started from the edges and worked inward. It took him until 2 in the morning to find the name he wasn't looking for yet. Yoon Seol-ah, a dormant provision in his divorce settlement, buried in the language about confidentiality and asset disclosure, had been accessed 6 weeks earlier by a third-party entity. The entity was a shell. The shell pointed to another shell. The second shell pointed to a legal firm in Portland that had done one piece of work for one client in 2019. Yoon Seol-ah. He sat back in his chair. He hadn't thought about Seola in 3 years. She had been peripheral to his world for a period, intelligent, precise, capable of patience that unsettled even him. And then she had simply not been. He had noticed her absence the way you notice the absence of a sound you've stopped hearing, briefly, and then not at all. She had disappeared when he married Imani. Now the divorce settlement had been touched. And Imani watched streets like someone was already on the other side of them. He closed the laptop and sat in the dark and felt something cold settle in his stomach that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. He had signed those divorce papers in March because he had decided, unilaterally, that removing Imani from his world was the safest thing he could do for her. What if the danger had already found her before he could make that choice matter? What if Imani hadn't hidden from him? What if she had been hiding from something that came from him? He picked up his phone. He put it back down. He had promised. Tuesdays. Before 8. He would wait. He would do, for possibly the first time in his adult life, the thing that did not come naturally to him at all. He would wait, and he would not act, and he would trust that the Tuesday call would give him enough. He sat in the dark with the name Yoon Seol-ah sitting in the middle of his chest like a stone. Outside, Seattle was doing what Seattle does in November. It rained quietly and without comment on everything alike. The first Tuesday call lasted 6 minutes. Kang-hyeon had his phone in his hand at 7:53, sitting at the kitchen island in a house that had felt too large since March, and he dialed her number at exactly 7:58, because calling 2 minutes early felt like exactly the kind of thing she would notice and file away. She picked up on the third ring. Hey. That was it. Not his name, not hello, just hey, the way you answer a call from someone you've decided to be civil with. How are you feeling? He said. Tired. Normal tired, not worried tired, before you ask. I wasn't going to ask. You were calculating whether to ask. A pause. Same thing. He let that sit. The appointment last week, did it go okay? It went fine. He's head down already. Doctor says that's early, but not unusual. That's good. Yeah. Silence. Not hostile. Just the particular silence of two people who used to share a bed and now share a phone signal and are both trying to figure out what the appropriate distance is for a conversation that doesn't have a rule book. I've been looking into some things, he said carefully. What kind of things? Things related to me, my structures, not you. A beat. Kang-hyeon. I'm not looking into you. I told you I wouldn't, and I meant it. He kept his voice level. But I found something that touches us both, and I think you should know there might be— Stop. Her voice was quiet but firm. Not yet. I'm not ready for that conversation yet. He wanted to push. Every trained instinct he had said push. Give her the information. Let her process it. Move to the solution. That was how he operated. That was how he had always operated. He said, okay. Another silence. Kang-hyeon. Her voice shifted slightly. Not softer exactly. More direct. Why did you really sign those papers? He wasn't expecting that. What do you mean? I mean, I've had 4 months to think about it, and I've landed on about 6 different answers, and none of them feel completely right. She paused. So I'm asking you. He looked at the kitchen counter, at the coffee he'd made and not touched, at the window where the Seattle morning was doing its gray and patient thing. Because I thought it was the right thing for you, he said. That's the answer you give other people. He was quiet. The real one, she said. Because I was scared, he said. The words came out rough, unpracticed. Because I'd been running the same operation for long enough that I could see all the ways it ends, and every one of those endings had collateral damage, and I decided I could control the damage by removing you from the equation before anything happened. He stopped. I thought that was protecting you. And now? Now I think it was the most controlling thing I ever did to you. She was quiet for a moment. Yeah, she said. It was. The call ended at 8:04. She said goodnight even though it was morning, which was something she used to do in their marriage when she was done with a conversation and wanted a clean exit. He'd forgotten about that habit. It landed somewhere in his chest and stayed there. He sat with his cold coffee and the name Yoon Seola and did not call Hae-won. He waited. The second Tuesday, she let him walk with her to a pharmacy 2 blocks from her building. She needed prenatal vitamins and a specific brand of crackers that only one store in her neighborhood stocked, and she mentioned this without invitation, which he understood was the closest thing to an olive branch he was going to get. They walked side by side. He kept his hands in his coat pockets. She kept hers around the grocery bag she refused to let him carry for the first block, and then shifted it to her left arm, and then, without saying anything, held it out toward him at the corner. He took it. Neither of them acknowledged the transaction. Inside the pharmacy, she moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had learned this neighborhood on her own terms. She knew which aisle. She knew the pharmacist's name. She said good morning to an elderly man reading a magazine near the blood pressure machine, and the man said good morning back like they'd done this before. Kang-hyeon watched her exist in a life that had been built entirely without him, and felt something he didn't have a clean word for. At the register, she said, without looking at him, "You're staring." "I'm not." "You've been watching me like I'm doing something impressive." "You are." She looked at him then, quick, sharp, evaluating. Then she looked back at the register. "I'm buying crackers, Kang-hyeon." "I know what you're doing." She didn't respond to that. She paid. She took the bag. They walked out. On the sidewalk, she said, "I talked to Nari." He slowed slightly. "When?" "About 3 months ago, right after I moved here." She kept walking at her own pace. "I needed to ask her something." "What did you ask her?" She was quiet for a moment, working out how much to give him. He recognized the calculation because he did it himself, and seeing it on her face was like looking at a version of himself he wasn't sure he liked. "Whether any of your legal structures, your LLCs, your holding companies, anything attached to your name could be used to track someone. A physical address. A lease." She glanced at him sideways. "I needed to know if I was exposed." He stopped walking. She took 3 more steps before she stopped too and turned around. "You were already scared when you moved here," he said. "Yes." "Before I found you at the crosswalk." "Long before." "Why didn't you tell me?" He heard the sharpness in his own voice and tried to pull it back. "I could have—" "You could have what?" She looked at him directly. "Investigated? Deployed people? Made decisions about my safety that I didn't get a vote in?" She raised her eyebrows. "Tell me which part of that would have been different from the last 2 years of our marriage." He didn't have an answer. "I handled it," she said. "I moved. I changed my number. I paid cash. I asked Nari one targeted question and she answered it. She shifted the pharmacy bag. I wasn't waiting to be rescued." "I know that. Do you?" He held her gaze. "Yes." She studied him for a moment, then turned and kept walking. He fell into step beside her. "The question I asked Nari," she said. "She gave me a real answer. She sat with me for 2 hours and went through everything she knew about how your structures work." A pause. "She loves you, you know, but she was angry at you." "About the divorce." "About a lot of things. She said you had a habit of deciding what was best for the people around you without consulting them." Imani's voice was even, not loading the observation with anything extra. "She said she'd been watching you do it since you were 19. He looked at the sidewalk. "She's not wrong." "No." A brief silence. "She's also the one who told me that if I was really worried about exposure, there was one name I should know." He felt it before she said it. The cold thing in his stomach from 3 weeks ago, back again. "Seola," he said. Imani stopped walking for the second time. She turned and looked at him with an expression he hadn't seen before. Not surprise exactly, more like the confirmation of something she'd been holding in suspension. "Nari told you too," she said. "I found it myself. In the divorce settlement. There was a confidentiality provision, dormant, shouldn't have been accessible to anyone, that was accessed 6 weeks ago by a third party. I traced it back. To Yoon Seola. To a shell that connects to her, yes. Imani was quiet for a long moment. The pharmacy bag hung from her fingers. Around them, the neighborhood went about its business. A dog being walked, a woman unlocking a shop, the particular sound of Seattle mid-morning. She started sending messages about 4 months ago, Imani said finally, right around when the papers were signed. He went very still. What kind of messages? Nothing threatening, that's what made it worse. She looked up the street like she was checking something, old habit or new one. He couldn't tell. Just observations, things she'd seen, where I'd been, what I was wearing. Her jaw tightened slightly. She never said who she was, but she knew things she shouldn't have known. You should have told me. The look she gave him was not unkind. It was just exhausted. You were my ex-husband, she said, in a marriage where I spent years not being told things because someone decided that was safer. And you want to know why I didn't immediately call you with information about a threat? He closed his mouth. She started walking again. He walked beside her and said nothing for the rest of the block. At her building, she stopped and looked at him. Her expression had settled into something more complicated than anger. It was the face of someone who has made peace with a situation and is only now beginning to wonder if that peace was premature. She knows I'm pregnant, Imani said. She knew before you did. I'm almost certain of it. He said nothing. And she knows where I live. She watched his face. So whatever you found in those legal structures, whatever you've been sitting on since before that first Tuesday call, I think you need to tell me now. He nodded slowly. Okay. Not here. She glanced at the street, the same way she'd glanced at the crosswalk. Come up. He followed her inside for the first time. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor, small, organized in the particular way of someone who has moved enough times to know which things matter and which things take up space for no reason. A reading chair near the window with a lamp that was clearly used. A bookshelf that had been packed carefully, not decoratively, but functionally, the way you pack a shelf when the books are actually being read. The kitchen was clean but lived in. A mug on the counter, a bowl in the drying rack. He stood in the middle of it and understood without being told that this was what she had built on the other side of him. It was a good life, small and careful and entirely hers. Sit, she said, and gestured at the couch. He sat. She lowered herself into the reading chair with the practiced care of someone in her 3rd trimester navigating furniture, and he kept his hands on his knees and didn't offer to help. Tell me, she said. He told her. All of it. The dormant provision, the shell companies, the trace back to Seola's legal firm in Portland, the timeline, which put Seola's access to the divorce records at almost exactly the same time the messages had started. The fact that Seola had been peripheral to his organization years before his marriage and had disappeared, cleanly, completely, without any apparent exit, when he and Imani had their wedding. He told her about the name, the pattern, the patience of it. And he told her the one thing he'd been sitting with alone since 2 a.m. 3 weeks ago, that Seola wasn't threatening Imani directly, because that wasn't the point. The point was that Imani would disappear on her own, move again, vanish further, remove herself from his orbit permanently, rather than live in the permanent awareness of being watched. She's not trying to hurt you, he said. She's trying to make you leave. Imani was quiet for a long moment. I know, she said. He looked at her. I figured that out about 2 months in. She leaned back slightly in the chair. When I realized the messages always came right after something that could be connected to you. After Nari's visit. After I walked past one of your shipping offices on my way to an appointment. She looked at the window. She was marking territory. She just wasn't marking her own. He thought about what it took to work that out alone. To carry it alone. To move cities and pay cash and change numbers and still wake up every morning knowing the messages could start again without warning. I should have, he started. Don't. She looked at him. Don't do the thing where you decide in retrospect what you should have done differently and turn it into a new form of the same habit. She shook her head. I made my choices. So did you. We're here now. What do you want to do? He said. She looked at him like the question surprised her. He understood why. He had spent most of their marriage telling her what they were going to do, with the certainty of a man who had decided protecting someone meant removing their options. This was the first time he had sat across from her with an actual problem in front of them and asked what she wanted. She seemed to need a moment to believe the question was real. "I want her gone," Imani said. I don't mean, I know what you mean. I mean legally, completely. I want documentation, restrictions, the access to those records severed permanently." She leaned forward slightly. "And I want to be part of how that happens. Not informed after the fact. Part of it." "Okay. That means no parallel operation, no Haiwan doing something on a separate track that you tell me about when it's done." Her eyes were steady. "Everything in front of me." "That's not how I know it's not." She held his gaze. "That's the point." He sat with that, felt the discomfort of it. Not because she was wrong, but because she was asking him to operate in a way that went against the deepest grain of how he'd built his life. Every instinct he had said manage the information, control the variables, present the outcome. She was asking him to hand her the variables. "Okay," he said. "Say it like you mean it." "Okay." Steadier this time, slower. "Everything in front of you, nothing on a separate track." She studied him. Then she nodded once. Short, decisive. "I have all the messages," she said. "Screenshots, timestamps, everything. I've kept them since the second one arrived." She stood carefully, moved to a kitchen drawer and pulled out a folder he hadn't seen. She brought it to the coffee table and set it down in front of him. "I've been building a file." He looked at the folder, then at her. "You've been building a case," he said. "I've been protecting myself." A slight correction. "It just looks like a case." He opened the folder. The messages were printed and arranged chronologically. Each one had a handwritten note beside it in her handwriting. Date, her location that day, what she had been doing, cross-referenced. Methodical. The kind of documentation that took patience and clear thinking and the refusal to be paralyzed by fear. He looked through 3 pages before he looked up at her. "This is good," he said. "I know it is." She sat back down. No pride in it, just fact. "My attorney can use this, combined with what I found in the settlement records." "How long?" He thought about it honestly. "Weeks, not months. The paper trail is already there, she just needs to be connected to it formally. The shell companies are thin, they were built for speed, not durability." He looked at the folder again. "She didn't expect this to be documented." "Nobody ever thinks I'm documenting," Imani said quietly. He closed the folder. Outside, a cloud passed, and for about 30 seconds the apartment filled with flat gray light that made everything look exactly like what it was. 2 people sitting across from each other in a small room, trying to figure out how to fix something that had broken in several places at once. Then his phone buzzed. He ignored it. It buzzed again. He looked at the screen. "Hey Juan, 3 times in 2 minutes. "Take it," Imani said. He answered. "What?" Heywan's voice was low and tight in that particular way that meant the information was bad, and he'd already spent 30 seconds deciding how to deliver it. "We have a problem. The Portland firm. The one connected to the shell. They filed a motion this morning, attached to your divorce settlement. They're claiming a disclosure irregularity." "What kind of irregularity?" "They're alleging you concealed assets during the proceedings." A pause. "There's documentation. I don't know where they got it, but it looks credible on paper. If it holds up, it reopens the settlement terms and gives her legal standing to access your financial records." He kept his voice flat. "All of them." "That's the exposure, yes." He looked at Imani. She was watching his face, reading it the way she had always been able to read it, through all the control he'd trained himself to maintain. She could hear the shape of the problem even through one side of a phone call. "Handle nothing," he said. "I'll call you in an hour." He hung up. A beat of silence. "She's not just trying to scare me away anymore," he said. Imani's hands, resting on the arms of the chair, were perfectly still, but her jaw had tightened. "What did she do?" "She filed a legal motion this morning, claiming I hid assets during the divorce." He held her gaze. "If it goes anywhere, she gets access to my financial structure under the settlement framework, everything that touches my name." Imani closed her eyes, opened them. "She's not just going after me," she said. "She's going after everything." She's escalating, he said, because the messages didn't work. Imani looked at him steadily. She knows I didn't leave. She knows I found you, or she suspected it. Either way. He put his phone on the coffee table. She's done waiting. The apartment was very quiet. Imani put one hand on her stomach, not dramatically, just the way she did sometimes without thinking, the unconscious gesture of a woman 7 months along checking in on the small person she was carrying through all of this. She looked at Kang-hyeon. He looked at her. Okay, she said. Her voice was steady. Quieter than usual, but steady. Then we move faster. He nodded. And Kang-hyeon. She held his eyes. Whatever you're about to plan, whatever the next step looks like, I need you to remember what you promised me 10 minutes ago. Everything in front of you. Everything, she said. Outside the apartment window, the gray November sky sat over Seattle the way it always did, patient, indifferent, and utterly without mercy. And somewhere in Portland, in an office connected to a shell company connected to a name that neither of them had spoken in years, Yoon Seola read the confirmation that her motion had been filed, and for the first time in months she allowed herself something that almost resembled a smile. She had spent a long time learning how to be patient. She had spent even longer learning what Seo Kang-hyeon cared about most. And now, for the first time, she had her hands on both. He called his attorney from the car. Not Hae-won. His attorney, Min Jae-sung, 61 years old, who had been cleaning up complicated situations for Kang-hyeon's organization for 14 years, and who answered his phone with the particular tone of a man who had already read the filing and was waiting for this exact call. How bad? Kang-hyeon said. On paper, it's credible. Min's voice was precise and unhurried in the way of someone who has learned that panic is expensive. The documentation they submitted shows what appears to be 3 offshore accounts that weren't disclosed during the settlement proceedings. Combined value stated at approximately 4.2 million. And are those accounts real? A pause. That's the question, isn't it? Kang-hyeon looked out the car window. Park was driving without being told where to go, which was what Park did when he understood that the destination hadn't been decided yet. Talk to me plainly, Jae-sung. The account numbers are real. They exist. They are attached to entities that can be traced to your holding structure. Another pause. But the transactions inside them, the ones they're using as evidence of concealment, those were fabricated. The dates don't align with your actual movement history. Someone built these accounts to look like yours, populated them with manufactured transaction records, and handed the package to that Portland firm. Seol Ah. I'd say almost certainly. The construction is sophisticated. This took months. Min's voice stayed level, but something underneath it had sharpened. Whoever built this knew your financial architecture well enough to make convincing forgeries. That's not someone who Googled your name. Kang-hyeon felt the cold in his stomach turn into something harder. She had inside information, he said. That's my read. From where? That's what I'd be asking, Min said. Because my office has been handling your structure for 14 years, and the level of detail in those documents goes beyond anything publicly traceable. Someone gave her a map. He hung up. Park glanced in the rearview mirror once and then looked back at the road. Kang-hyeon sat with the word map and thought about who in his organization had ever had full visibility into his financial architecture. Not the operational side, not the logistics and the supply chains and the arrangements that kept the criminal half of his empire functioning. The financial side. The legitimate structures, the LLCs, the holding companies, the offshore arrangements that Min managed. That list was short. 6 people, maybe 7. He had trusted every one of them for years. He pulled out his phone and called Hae-won. I need the internal calendar, he said when Hae-won picked up. Every meeting, every consultation, every access log for the financial records over the last 18 months. Cross-reference it with external contact. Any communications from numbers or addresses connected to Portland, to any legal firm, to anything that touches Yoon Seola's name. That's going to take how long? A brief silence. 12 hours if I pull the right people. You have 8. He hung up. The car moved through Seattle's mid-morning traffic. Kang-hyeon thought about Imani in her apartment with the folder she'd built on her own kitchen table. He thought about her sitting across from him and saying everything in front of me, And he thought about how he had meant it when he said, okay, and how the 8 hours he'd just set Hae-won on were going to be the test of whether he actually meant it. He called her. She picked up on the second ring. That was fast. I need to tell you something before I start making calls. He kept his voice even. My attorney confirmed the filing is built on fabricated documents, account records that were manufactured to look like mine. Whoever built them had detailed knowledge of my financial structure. Silence on her end. Which means, she said, someone close to you helped her. Yes. Another silence, longer. Are you going to tell me who you think it is? She said. I don't know yet. Hae-won is pulling records. Okay. A breath. Okay. What are you doing right now? Trying to figure out how she got the map. And when you find out? He thought about the honest answer, about what the old version of himself would do with the name of someone who had handed his financial architecture to a woman using it to destroy his family. He thought about what that would look like, and what it would cost, and what it would mean to the promise he'd made 20 minutes ago in that apartment. I'm going to tell you, he said, and then we decide together. She was quiet long enough that he counted 4 seconds. Okay, she said. He went back to his office. Not the public-facing one in the glass tower downtown. The real one, on the 4th floor of a building that appeared on no directory, accessed through a parking structure that his people had used for 11 years. He sat at his actual desk, worn leather, stacks of physical files he'd never moved to digital because digital left different kinds of trails, and waited. Hae-won arrived in 3 hours, not 8. He came in without knocking, which he only did when the information was urgent enough to override protocol. He closed the door behind him and put a single printed page on the desk. Tell me, Kang-hyeon said. 18 months ago, you had a consultation with Min about restructuring the offshore component of the Meridian Holdings. Hae-won stayed standing, which he also only did when the conversation was going to be short or very bad. 3 people were in that meeting. You, Min, and 1 associate who was brought in to handle the documentation logistics. Kang-hyeon looked at the page. The name sat in the middle of it like something dropped from a height. Song Dae-won. He had known Dae-won for 11 years, had promoted him from a junior logistics role to his current position, financial coordination, which meant Dae-won sat at the intersection of the legitimate and operational sides of the organization. He had trusted him with things that could end Kang-hyeon's freedom. He had attended Dae-won's wedding 4 years ago. He had sent flowers when Dae-won's mother died in June. When, Kang-hyeon said, his voice came out flat. Not angry, just flat, the way a surface feels after something has been stripped off it. Contact initiated approximately 14 months ago. Encrypted channel, but not encrypted well enough. Whoever set it up was thorough, but not expert. Hae-won put a second page down. He began providing financial documentation in increments, small pieces that wouldn't be noticed individually. Seo assembled them into the complete picture over about 8 months. What did he get? Hae-won was quiet for a moment. His family's debt, he said. Dae-won's younger brother ran up approximately $2 million in losses through a business failure 18 months ago. Seo paid it off in installments. Each installment coincided with a document transfer. Kang-hyeon looked at the page. He thought about the wedding, about Dae-won's face when he danced with his wife, about the flowers in June. Where is he now? He said. His office. Normal schedule. Kang-hyeon nodded slowly. Don't touch him. Hae-won blinked. Sir? Don't touch him. Don't approach him. Don't let him know we know. He looked up at Hae-won. We do nothing that gives Seo any indication we've found the leak. If she knows we know, she accelerates. She has that motion filed, and she has fabricated documents, and she has a Portland attorney, and she will use all of it the moment she thinks we're closing in. So we leave him. We leave him where he is, and we use him. He picked up the pages. Everything he's given her, she's used, which means she thinks she's ahead. I want her to keep thinking that. Hae-won studied him. What are you going to do? Call Min. Tell him to prepare a response to the motion that buys us 30 days without revealing how much we know. Then I need to see Nari. Your sister? She had a conversation with Imani 3 months ago. She knows something about Seo that she hasn't told me yet. He stood. Set the meeting for tonight. Her place, not mine. He called Imani from the parking structure. She listened without interrupting while he told her about Daewon, about the brother's debt, about the 14 months of incremental document transfers. He didn't soften any of it. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "He's been inside your organization the whole time," she said, "while she was sending me those messages, while she filed the motion." A pause. "He was in the room for all of it, and she had a man inside the whole time." "Yes." Kang-hyeon. Her voice had changed, something tighter in it. "She had someone inside before we even got divorced, before the papers. She was building this while we were still married." He'd reached the same conclusion 20 minutes earlier and had been sitting with it since. "Yes," he said. "So the divorce didn't remove me from danger." She said it quietly, the words landing carefully, like she was testing the weight of each one. "It just changed the shape of it." He didn't answer because there was no answer that improved the situation. She breathed out. "What do you need from me?" "Nothing right now. I'm seeing Nari tonight." "Why Nari?" "She warned you about Seola's name. That means she knew something she hadn't told me. I need to know what." Another silence. Then, "Kang-hyeon, be careful how you go into that conversation." "What do you mean?" "I mean Nari has spent a lot of years being on the outside of things you decided." "Same as me." A pause. "Don't walk in there interrogating her. Ask her." He thought about that. "Okay. And tell me what she says." "I will." Nari lived in a townhouse in Capitol Hill that she'd bought herself 3 years ago after spending too many years in properties chosen by Kang-hyeon for their security features rather than their livability. She opened the door before he knocked, which meant she'd seen him on the street camera, and she stood in the doorway in a worn sweater with a cup of tea and an expression that contained in roughly equal measure affection and the particular kind of bracing that people do when they know a difficult conversation is coming. "You look terrible," she said. "I know. Come in." Her living room was warm and cluttered in the way of someone who lived alone and had decided to be comfortable about it. Stacks of books. A blanket on the couch. A half-finished puzzle on the coffee table that looked like it had been there for weeks. He sat on the couch. She sat across from him in an armchair and wrapped both hands around her mug and looked at him. "Seola," he said. Nari nodded slowly, like she'd been waiting for this word specifically. "Tell me what you know," he said, and then, remembering, "Please." Nari looked at him for a moment, then she looked at her tea. "I knew her," she said. "Not well, but I knew who she was before you married Imani." She paused. "She used to come to certain events, on the periphery of your world, not operational, not in the organization, just adjacent to it, the way certain people are adjacent. I remember. She wasn't subtle about how she felt about you." Nari's voice was careful, measured. "I noticed it because I noticed those things. You didn't because you were already involved with Imani by then, and you had decided Seola wasn't relevant. She wasn't. She was. You just weren't watching." Nari looked up at him. "When you announced the engagement, she disappeared. I assumed she'd moved on. People do." A pause. "And then about 8 months ago, I started hearing her name again." He went still. "From who?" "A woman I know who moves in some of the same circles Seola used to. She mentioned seeing Seola at an event in Portland. Said she seemed different, more focused, like someone who'd been working toward something." Nari set her mug down. "And then Imani showed up at my door." He waited. "She asked me about your financial structures, specifically about whether any of your entities could be used to track someone's address. She was calm about it, but she had that look." Nari paused. "The look someone has when they've been managing fear for a long time and gotten very good at hiding it. Why didn't you tell me?" Nari looked at him steadily. "Because she asked me not to." "Nari, she's a grown woman who came to me for information, not for you." Her voice was gentle but firm in a way that reminded him, sharply and suddenly, of their mother. "She wasn't asking me to help her hide from you. She was asking me to help her protect herself from something attached to you." She tilted her head slightly. "Those are different things." He sat with that. "And Seola?" he said. "What else do you know?" "I know she's patient in a way that should have worried you years ago." Nari picked up her mug again. "I know she's not unstable, She's not acting out of rage. She's acting out of something much more calculated than that, which makes her more dangerous. She looked at him, and I know she reached out to me once. The room got very quiet. When? He said. 7 months ago. Email. Untraceable address. But the phrasing, it was her. She said she'd heard about Imani's situation, and she thought I should know that you had been dishonest during the divorce proceedings, that you'd hidden assets. Nari's jaw tightened slightly. She sent me a document, financial records. You didn't tell me. I deleted it. Nari met his eyes. Because I know your financial records better than she thought I did. And what she sent me didn't match what I knew. She set down the mug again, more firmly this time. She didn't know I'd seen your real structure. She thought I was a sister who loved you but didn't understand your business. She miscalculated you. People usually do. A brief pause. The document she sent me, I deleted it, but I printed one page first. I didn't know why at the time. I just had a feeling. She stood, moved to a bookshelf, lifted a stack of papers from the second shelf, and extracted a single folded page. She brought it to him. He unfolded it. It was a transaction record, one of the manufactured accounts. He recognized the structure immediately, the same architecture as what Min had described. But this copy was 7 months old, which meant Seola had been building this fabricated case almost from the beginning. And in the top corner, in a small font that had almost been cropped out, was a reference number. He looked at it for a long moment. He pulled out his phone and called Min. Reference number, he said. I'm going to read it to you. Tell me what it means. He read it. Min was quiet for 4 seconds. That's an internal reference format, he said slowly, from our document management system. The numbering convention. That's specific to my office's filing structure. Kang-hyeon's hand tightened on the page. She got it from inside your office. It looks that way. Min's voice had gone very careful. Not from me. I want to be clear. I know. Who else has access to your filing system? My associate, Kim Soo-yeon. She handles document preparation. And Min stopped. Min. A long silence. My paralegal resigned 8 months ago, Min said. I attributed it to a better offer. His name is... I don't need his name yet. Kang-hyeon folded the page. I need you to pull his full file. Every document he touched in the 18 months before he left. Tonight. He hung up. Neri was watching him from across the coffee table. She has 2 sources, he said. It came out quiet, almost to himself. Daiwan inside my organization and someone inside Min's office. She's been building this from 2 directions at once. Neri was quiet for a moment. Then, she had a year. More. Kang-hyeon. His sister leaned forward slightly. She built this while you were still married to Imani, which means at some point her plan wasn't just to separate you. It was to take everything. He stood. He walked to Nari's front window and looked out at Capitol Hill in the November dark. A restaurant across the street with yellow light in the windows. A couple walking a dog. The ordinary texture of a city that had no idea what was being built inside it. The legal motion, he said. If it succeeds, if the court accepts the fabricated documents and reopens the settlement, Seola's legal representative gets access to my financial disclosures under the settlement framework, all of them. He turned. She gets the map, the real one, which she can use to expose the operational side, the parts that aren't clean. He looked at his sister. She doesn't want money. She doesn't want me. She wants to burn what I built and watch it happen. Nari sat very still. And Imani? Imani is collateral damage in the original plan. Get rid of her. Take down the empire. Leave me with nothing. He looked at his sister. Except Imani didn't leave. And now she knows we're reconciling. And a pregnant Imani who stays in my life means the plan doesn't complete. He paused. So she escalates. What are you going to do? He thought about Imani's folder on the coffee table, the handwritten notes beside each message, the timestamps, the cross-references. He thought about what she had said, everything in front of me. He thought about what the old version of himself would do right now, the version that had spent 20 years believing that the only way to neutralize a threat was to move faster, harder, and with more force than the threat expected. He thought about what that version of himself had already cost him once. I'm going to do something I've never done before, he said. Nari raised her eyebrows. I'm going to let someone else lead. He drove back across the city. It was past 9. He called Imani before he rang the street buzzer. I'm outside, he said. I know it's late. I need to tell you what Nari told me, all of it. A pause. Then the buzzer sounded. He went up. She was in the reading chair when he came in, wrapped in a blanket, a glass of water on the side table. She looked tired in the way of someone who has been trying to rest and not managing it. She looked at him when he came through the door, and he read her face the way he'd always been able to read it. She'd already been thinking hard about something, alone, and had reached a conclusion she wasn't certain about. Sit, she said. He sat on the couch. He told her everything. Nari's email from Seola, the reference number, the paralegal inside Min's office. The two-source structure Seola had been running for over a year. The real shape of the plan, not just driving Imani away, but using the legal motion to open Kang-hyeon's records and expose the operational structure of everything he'd built. When he finished, Imani was quiet for a long time. She wants to destroy you, she said finally. Yes. And I'm the thing standing between her and the plan. She looked at him. Because if I leave, you collapse. And if I stay, I'm a target. You were always a target, he said. I thought I was protecting you by leaving. I was just removing myself from the equation while she kept moving. Imani absorbed that slowly. She looked at the window, at the dark November outside. She put one hand on her stomach, that unconscious gesture, the checking in, and was quiet for long enough that he didn't rush her. Then she looked at him and said, I need you to do something. Tell me. I need you to give me Daewon's file. Everything Haewon pulled on him, and Min's paralegal. When Min sends you that file tonight, I need that too. He looked at her. What are you going to do with them? Build a case that doesn't rely on your organization doing anything that could be used against you later. She held his gaze steadily. You have a criminal organization, Kang-hyeon. If you respond to this the way your organization responds to things, she gets exactly what she needs. Evidence of the methods. Exposure of the structure. She leaned forward slightly. But I have a folder full of harassment documentation, time-stamped and cross-referenced. I have a fabricated legal filing that can be forensically examined. I have a paralegal who resigned under suspicious circumstances, and a shell company chain that an attorney with the right access can unravel. She paused. What I don't have is someone who can navigate the business side of your structure without exposing it. I can do that. Then we do it together. She held out her hand. Send me the files. He looked at her hand, at the steadiness of her, at the woman who had spent 7 months alone in a city being watched by someone dangerous, building her own case, paying cash, changing her number, and still managing to have a doctor and a pediatrician and a shelf full of books she was actually reading. He picked up his phone and forwarded Haewon's report. Then Min called. He answered on speaker without thinking, which was something he'd never done with a call from Min in 14 years. The paralegal, Min said. His name is Park Hyun-seok. He left my office 8 months ago. I've been through his document access logs for the 18 months prior. A pause. He accessed and copied 31 internal files related to your financial structure. The copies were made in increments, never more than 2 in a single week, never the same category twice in a row. Slow enough not to trigger your monitoring. Exactly. Min's voice was tight. He was careful, but he wasn't careful enough about the exit point. The copies were transmitted through a personal cloud account he left connected to our network. I have the destination address. Imani had her phone out. She was writing something down. Can you get us the access logs? She said. A brief silence on Min's end. He hadn't known she was there. Imani, he said carefully. Yes. I can document everything in a format that's admissible if needed. Then please do that, she said. And Min, is there a way to connect the fabricated account documents in the legal filing to the specific files Park Hyun-seok copied from your office? Another pause. Longer. The reference number and the formatting would trace back to our internal system. If I can show the court that a specific document format used in Seola's filing was only accessible through my office's internal filing system, and that the only person who had access to that system and then left under those circumstances was Park Hyun-seok. It connects the fabrication back to the source, Imani said. It builds the chain, yes. How long do you need? 48 hours for a full evidentiary package. She looked at Kang-hyeon. He looked at her. Do it, he said. Min hung up. The apartment was quiet. Imani set her phone down on the side table beside her water glass and looked at him with an expression he wasn't sure he had ever seen on her face before. Not in their marriage, not in any of the careful Tuesday calls, not even in the crosswalk on the day he'd found her. It was the look of someone who has decided to stop waiting and start moving. She thinks you're going to come at her the way you come at everything, Imani said. Fast, hard, with the organization behind you. That's what she built the plan around. So we don't do that. She pulled the blanket tighter. We build a legal case that's clean enough to stand without any of your operational methods attached to it. We let Min do his 48 hours. We document Daewon's payments without touching him. And we file a counter motion that turns her fabricated evidence against her. She paused. And we do all of it in front of each other. He nodded. Then his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. New sender. No name. Just an address that was a string of random characters. The subject line read, "For the baby." He looked at it for 1 second before Imani made a small, sharp sound. He looked up. She had both hands pressed to her stomach. Her face had gone white. Kang-hyeon, her voice came out wrong, compressed, like something was pressing on it from the inside. He was off the couch before she finished his name. What's wrong? Something... She stopped. Her breath came in short, and her hands pressed harder, and her eyes went somewhere interior that had nothing to do with the room. Is it the baby? She couldn't answer. He had his phone in his hand, coat already half on, keys already moving, the email still open on his screen with its unopened attachment and its subject line that neither of them had read yet. And in that moment, every plan and every countermotion and every carefully constructed legal strategy dissolved into a single irreducible fact. None of it mattered if she wasn't okay. None of it had ever mattered for any other reason. He didn't wait for the elevator. He got his arm around her waist and she leaned into him. Not because she wanted to. He could feel her resistance even through the pain, that deep-seated refusal to need propping up, but because her body had stopped asking permission from her pride. She was breathing in short pulls, each one audible, each one just slightly wrong in a way that scared him more than anything that had happened in the last 3 weeks. I can walk, she said. I know you can. Then let me... Imani. He kept moving toward the stairs. Let me do this one thing. She stopped arguing. That scared him too. The stairs were narrow and he took them carefully, one at a time, his arms solid around her back and his hand at her elbow, and his mind running 2 tracks simultaneously. The immediate track, which was, get her to the car, get her to the hospital, get her to someone who can tell him she's going to be okay. And the other track, the one he couldn't shut off, which was the email still open on his phone in his coat pocket with its subject line and its unopened attachment, and the fact that the pain had started within 30 seconds of that notification arriving. That was not a coincidence. He did not say this out loud. The night air hit them at the building entrance and Imani pulled in a breath, sharp and involuntary, and pressed her free hand harder against her stomach. He felt the tension in her arm, the way she was holding herself together through something that wanted her to stop holding. Talk to me, he said. He was moving toward the car, keys already out. Tell me what it feels like. Pressure. Her voice was compressed. And cramping. But not... She stopped. Breathed. Not like contractions. I've read about contractions. This is different. Different how? Constant. Not rhythmic. She looked at him. Her eyes were clear even through the pain. She was scared, but she was present. And that steadiness of hers that had frustrated him for years was the thing holding him together right now. It started suddenly. How suddenly? The second I saw your face change when you looked at the phone. He got her into the passenger seat. He closed the door carefully, not slamming it, not rushing the latch, because some part of him understood that the quality of small physical actions mattered right now, that every movement he made either added to her fear or reduced it. He got behind the wheel. He drove. Not fast in a way that announced itself. Fast in the particular controlled way of someone who has driven through situations where speed and panic are not the same thing, where the difference between getting somewhere and getting somewhere is the steadiness of hands on a wheel. The email, Imani said. She was looking straight ahead, managing her breathing, in through the nose, 4 counts, out through the mouth. He recognized it as a technique. She'd been learning breathing for labor, and she was applying it now, not because this was labor, but because her body needed the same regulation. Don't think about the email right now. I'm already thinking about it. A short exhale. What was the attachment? We didn't open it. She sent it at exactly the right moment. Imani's voice was careful and deliberate, each word placed. She knew. She knew we were together. She's been watching the building. I know. She wanted you to open that email in front of me. She turned her head slightly. She knew what it would do. He kept his eyes on the road. What do you mean? Whatever's in that attachment, it's designed to look like you went back to your old life, something that would make me doubt everything that's happened in the last 3 weeks. Her hand pressed against her stomach again, harder. She timed it for when we'd just gotten close enough that the damage would be maximum. He thought about this for 2 blocks. The cold thing in his stomach had turned into something else. Not anger exactly, but something adjacent to it, something with edges. You figured that out while you were in pain, he said. I figure better when I'm scared. A breath. It's a design flaw. He pulled up to the hospital emergency entrance and had her door open before she'd finished processing that they'd stopped. He helped her out, kept his arm around her, walked through the automatic doors into the fluorescent, brutal brightness of the ER. He told the intake nurse what was happening in 12 words. 34 weeks pregnant, sudden onset abdominal pain, constant not rhythmic, started 10 minutes ago. They moved fast after that. He sat in a chair outside the curtained area and listened to the sounds of the hospital and did not touch his phone. He sat with his elbows on his knees and his hands loosely clasped, and he looked at the floor tiles, and he breathed. A nurse came out after 6 minutes. Are you the father? Yes. She's asking for you. He went in. Imani was on his bed with monitors attached and an IV line being set, and she looked smaller in the hospital gown than he'd ever seen her look, which meant nothing about her actual state but hit him somewhere undefended anyway. She looked at him when he came through the curtain. Don't make a face, she said. I'm not making a face. You're making the face you make when you're trying not to make a face. She looked at the monitors. The baby's heartbeat is on there. Look. He looked at the monitor. The line spiked and fell. Spiked and fell. 148 beats per minute, steady and insistent, this small person's heart conducting its own business through all of this with the complete indifference of the very young to adult catastrophe. He sat down in the chair beside her bed. He put his hand on the bed rail. Not on her hand. Close to it, but not on it. Waiting to see what she needed. She moved her hand and covered his. Neither of them said anything. The doctor came in 12 minutes later, younger than either of them, with a direct manner that Kang-hyeon found immediately trustworthy because she didn't perform reassurance. She looked at the monitors, asked Imani 4 questions, pressed in 2 places on her abdomen that made Imani's breath catch, and then straightened up. Uterine contractions, she said, stress-induced, compounded by dehydration. She looked at the monitors again. Not premature labor. Your son is not in distress. His heart rate and position are both good. She looked at Imani directly. But your body is telling you something, and you need to listen to it. What does it need? Imani said. Water, rest, and whatever is causing the acute stress, if there's any way to reduce it, you need to do that. She made a note. We're going to keep you for a few hours, get fluids in, monitor. If the contractions ease off and nothing changes on the fetal side, you go home tonight. She left. The curtain settled behind her. Imani looked at the ceiling for a moment, then at him. I'm okay, she said. I know. He's okay. I know that too. She was quiet. The monitor spiked and fell, spiked and fell. Open the email, she said. He looked at her. Kang-hyeon, open it. I'd rather know what's in it while I'm already in a hospital than find out later and have this happen again alone. She held his gaze. Open it. He took his phone out. He opened the email. The attachment was a video file. 43 seconds. He turned the phone so they could both see it, and he pressed play. The footage was security camera quality. Slightly grainy, wide angle, the timestamp in the corner reading 6 days ago. The location was the parking structure below his office building. The real office, not the public one. The footage showed Kang-hyeon and Hye-won standing near a car. talking. Nothing unusual in the posture or the geography. They'd had 100 conversations in that parking structure in 9 years. Then the audio came up. It had been edited, spliced together from different recordings. He could hear the seams if he listened, the slight shifts in ambient sound, the way sentences that had been said separately were now sitting next to each other. But the edit was skilled enough that if you didn't know what you were listening for, you wouldn't find the seams. And what the edited audio made it sound like was this: Kang-hyeon telling Hye-won to surveil Imani's building, to track her movements, to run checks on everyone she contacted, everything she had asked him not to do, everything he had promised he wasn't doing. 43 seconds. He stopped the video. The monitor spiked and fell, spiked and fell. He looked at Imani. Her face was completely still. She was looking at the phone, at the frozen last frame of the video, the parking structure, the timestamp, his own posture caught in grainy gray. "It's edited," he said. "I know." Her voice was even. "The audio is spliced. You can hear—" "I know." She looked at him. "I know what real sounds like, Kang-hyeon. That's not what you sound like when you're giving actual orders." She paused. "And I know you promised me." He held her gaze. Something loosened slightly in his chest. Not relief, but the nearest thing to it. "But she doesn't know I'd know that," Imani said. "She built that for someone who's 7 months pregnant and scared and alone in a hospital room. She built it to make me think the last 3 weeks were theater." She looked back at the monitor. "She built it for a version of me that doesn't exist anymore." He was quiet for a moment. "What do you mean?" "I mean that 6 months ago, if someone handed me 43 seconds of that, I would have believed it, because it would have confirmed everything I already feared about you." She shifted slightly against the pillow. "She studied the old me. She built her weapon for the old me." A breath. "She doesn't know what's changed." He looked at his ex-wife lying in a hospital bed with monitors attached and an IV in her arm, carrying his son through a situation that was entirely his making, and he thought about all the ways that the thing he had done in March, the divorce, the self-sacrifice, the choice he had made for both of them, had not protected her from a single thing he'd been afraid of. He thought about what she had just said. She doesn't know what's changed. "I need to make some calls," he said. "I know." "From out there," he gestured at the curtain. "So you can rest." "I'm not going to rest." "Imani, make your calls." She settled back against the pillow. "Then come back in and tell me what you're going to do." He went out. He stood in the hallway with his phone and called Hye-won first. "The email she sent tonight," he said, keeping his voice low and flat. "I need our actual communications records from 6 days ago. Full audio, unedited, every conversation I had in that parking structure or anywhere near it." "Already pulling it," Hye-won said. "I saw the send notification on our monitoring. I assumed she'd finally moved." "She did. She used edited surveillance footage and spliced audio to fabricate an order I never gave." He paused. "Can our technical team produce a forensic analysis showing the edit points in the audio?" "Give me 2 hours." "You have one." He hung up. He called Min. "The evidentiary package," he said. "How much do you have ready right now? Not in 48 hours. Right now." Min was quiet for a moment. "About 60%. The forensic chain connecting Park Hyun-seok to the fabricated account documents is solid. The shell company trace is complete. What I don't have yet is the direct link between Seola's identity and the Portland firm." "How long for that piece?" "If I pull my associate off everything else and run it tonight, 6 hours." "Do that." He paused. "Min, she sent Imani a video tonight. Fabricated evidence designed to look like I violated the terms of our agreement. She's accelerating." "She's scared," Min said. "Something shifted and she's responding." "Yes." "What shifted?" He thought about Imani's folder, the handwritten notes, the timestamps, the paralegal's cloud account address that they now had, that Min now had, that was 6 hours away from being part of a complete legal package. "She found out we're building a case," he said. "Someone told her." He hung up and stood in the hallway and thought about that. She found out we're building a case. He had told 4 people tonight. Hye-won, Minyan, Na, and Imani. Nari he would not consider. Not for 1 second. Imani he would not consider. Not for 1 second, which left 2. He called Hae-won back. When you started pulling the communications records tonight, he said, who did you pull in to help? A silence. 2 of my people, Young and Bai. How long have they been with you? Young, 3 years. Bai, 14 months. 14 months, he calculated. Seola began building this case 14 to 18 months ago. Another silence. Longer. Bai had access to tonight's request, Hae-won said slowly. Yes. He would have seen the nature of the records pull. He would have understood what we were building. Yes. Silence. Hi, Won. Kang-hyeon kept his voice absolutely level. Leave him where he is. Don't let him know we know, but remove him from the communications records project right now. Give him something else, something real, something that keeps him occupied and away from anything sensitive. And the records? You finish them yourself. He hung up for the 3rd time in 6 minutes and leaned against the hospital corridor wall and looked at the ceiling. 3 sources. Daewon in his financial operation, Park Hyun-seok in Min's office, and now Bae inside Hae-won's security team. Seola hadn't just built a case. She had built an infrastructure. She had spent over a year placing people or finding people already placed, patient and methodical, building a network inside the thing he had spent 2 decades constructing. And she had done it quietly enough that none of his monitoring had caught it, because each piece was small and each person's betrayal was incremental, and the whole was invisible until you stood back far enough to see the shape of it. He pushed off the wall and went back into Imani's curtained area. She was lying with her eyes open, looking at the monitor. The contractions had eased. He could see it in the line's pattern. Her breathing had evened out. She looked at him when he came in. Tell me, she said. He told her. All of it. Bae inside Hae-won's team, the 3-source network, the infrastructure, the fact that Seola had not just responded to what he'd done but had been prepared for it, had built redundancy into her operation so that losing one channel wouldn't stop her. When he finished, Imani looked at the monitor for a moment. She's been watching you build things for years, she said. She knows how you build, so she built the same way. Yes. Which means she also built in a failsafe. She looked at him. If the legal motion fails, if the fabricated evidence gets disproved, she has something else. He had been thinking this since the parking structure footage. Yes. What does she have left? He didn't answer immediately. Kang-hyeon, her voice sharpened slightly. What does she have left? The operational records, he said. The things that aren't in Min's clean files. The things that never got put on paper in the first place. He looked at her steadily. She has 3 people inside my organization who have been watching for over a year. Even without documents, testimony is admissible. Imani was very still. She can put people on a stand, she said. With the right immunity offer, yes. And your operational history comes out. Some of it. He met her eyes. Enough. The monitor spiked and fell, spiked and fell. Then we have to move before she does, Imani said. The evidentiary package, not fast enough. She pushed herself up slightly against the pillow. Min has 60%. Hae-won has the audio analysis in an hour. That's enough to file a response to the motion and get the court to look at the fabrication claim. We don't need the full package to start. We need enough to create doubt and buy time. He looked at her. You've been thinking about this the whole time I was in the hall, he said. I had a monitor and an IV and nothing else to do. She held his gaze. Call Min. Tell him to file with what he has. The forensic chain on the account documents plus the shell company trace. File it tonight. It's past midnight. Emergency motions don't care what time it is. She was steady. The fear from earlier had burned into something else. Something focused and cold and entirely operational. He recognized it because he lived in it. He'd just never seen it on her before. File it tonight and let the fabricated evidence start being examined by someone other than us. He called Min. Min answered on the first ring, which meant he hadn't slept either. Kang-hyeon relayed Imani's assessment in 60 seconds. Min was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. She's right, he said. Filing with what we have creates an immediate legal record that her evidence is contested. It forces the court into an examination process before she can file anything additional. A pause. I'll have it ready in 90 minutes. He hung up. He sat back down in the chair beside Imani's bed. The monitor spiked and fell. You know what she's going to do when the emergency filing hits, he said. She's going to know we moved faster than she expected. Imani looked at the ceiling. She's going to know the plan is failing, and she's going to do something she hasn't done yet. She's going to make it personal, he said. She's going to try to reach me directly. Imani said it quietly. Not frightened. Prepared. Not through messages. She's been behind screens for months because she thought distance was safe. But when the legal play falls apart, she has nothing left but contact, which is what we need. Imani looked at him. If she contacts me directly, she's exposed. She's no longer behind shells and aliases. She's a person making contact with a person, and that's evidence we don't have yet. He understood what she was saying. He understood it, and every protective instinct he had recoiled from it. You're not bait, he said. I'm not suggesting I be bait. Her voice was even. I'm suggesting that when she reaches out, and she will, I don't run from it. I document it. I respond in ways that extend the contact and let her incriminate herself. She paused. I've been handling her messages for 4 months. I know how she communicates. Imani, you're 34 weeks pregnant, and you were just treated for, I know what I am. Not sharp, just clear. And I know what I'm capable of. Don't make that decision for me. He looked at her. She looked back. The old him would have said no and meant it and made the arrangements and informed her of them later. The old him had spent 2 years making exactly that category of choice. And the old him was the reason she had spent 7 months alone in a new city, paying cash and changing her number and building a folder of evidence on her own kitchen table. Okay, he said. Okay? You document it, you respond. I see everything in real time. Not after, during. He held her gaze. And if at any point you tell me to step in, I step in. Agreed. The doctor came back in at 2 in the morning. The contractions had stopped entirely. The baby's heart rate was perfect. Imani's blood pressure had come down. She could go home. He drove her back. They didn't talk much in the car. The kind of quiet that isn't empty. It's full of things being processed that don't have words yet. She looked out the window at the city moving past, her hand resting on her stomach, and he drove and thought about Min filing and Haewon pulling audio and 3 sources inside his organization who were still in place and still watching. At her building, she said, "Come up." He came up. He made tea because there was nothing else useful to do, and she sat in the reading chair and watched him fumble with her unfamiliar kettle with the particular expression of someone who has decided to find something endearing rather than frustrating. "Wrong cabinet," she said. "I found it." "That's the wrong kind of tea." "What's the right kind?" "Second shelf, the one with the blue lid." He found the right one. He made 2 cups and brought them over and sat on the couch, and they drank tea at 2:30 in the morning in her small apartment, and neither of them said anything for a while. Then her phone lit up. Not a message. A call. Unknown number. They both looked at it. It rang twice, 3 times. She looked at him. He nodded once. She answered it on speaker. Silence on the other end. Not empty silence. Occupied silence. The kind with someone in it. Then a voice. Low. Controlled. Precise in the way of someone who has rehearsed this moment for a very long time and is now making herself stay slow in it. "You're still there," the voice said. Imani looked at Kang-hyeon. He was already recording. "I'm still here," Imani said. A pause. "I thought the hospital might change your mind." The room dropped several degrees. Imani's hands were steady around her tea mug. "How do you know about the hospital?" "I know most things." Another pause. "I know more than you do about the man you're protecting." The voice was smooth, almost gentle. The gentleness of someone who has decided cruelty is more effective when it's soft. "He hasn't changed. Men like him don't change. They just get better at performing it." "What do you want?" Imani said. "I want you to open the email." A beat. The attachment. Watch all 43 seconds. "I already watched it." Silence. Longer than the others. "And," the voice said, "and I know what an audio edit sounds like." Imani's voice was completely even. "I've been married to him. I know his voice. I know how he gives orders." She paused. "That's not him." The silence that followed was different from the others. Kang-hyeon could feel it. the weight of someone processing an unexpected development, the recalculation happening in real time. "You're making a mistake," Yoon Seola said. "Maybe." Imani looked at Kang-hyeon steadily. "But it's mine to make." He built an empire on people who trusted him. The voice had shifted slightly, the smoothness wearing thin over something underneath it. "Your trust is just another asset to him." "Then why are you so afraid of it?" Imani said. Silence. "Why go to all this trouble?" Imani continued quietly. "The messages for months, the legal motion, the video, all of it. If I was just an asset he'd discard, why work this hard to remove me?" She paused. "What are you actually afraid of?" The line stayed open. No answer came. And in that silence, Kang-hyeon heard the first crack in something that had been built very carefully over a very long time. The sound of a plan meeting something it hadn't accounted for, which was a woman who had spent 7 months alone in a strange city, learning to be afraid without becoming afraid, and who was now sitting in her reading chair at 2:30 in the morning, 34 weeks pregnant, holding a phone steady with both hands and asking the right question with the calm of someone who already knew the answer wasn't coming, but knew that the silence itself was everything they needed. He looked at his phone. The recording was running, 40 seconds of open line. 50. Then the click of a call ended. Imani set her phone down. She looked at him. "She called from a real phone," he said. "Yes." "Our technical team can trace it." "Yes." He was already typing the message to Hae-won. Imani set her mug down on the side table and looked at the window. The city was doing its 4 in the morning thing. Not quiet exactly, but slower. The pulse of it dropped to something almost patient. "She's going to move tonight," Imani said. "Whatever she has left, she's going to move it now." "I know." "Are you ready?" He sent the message to Hae-won, picked up his own tea, looked at her. For most of his life, ready had meant having all the pieces controlled, the variables contained, the outcome mapped before the action. Ready had meant certainty, because certainty was the only version of ready he had ever trusted. He did not have certainty right now. He had Imani in a reading chair with her hand on her stomach and a phone that had just recorded 50 seconds of incriminating silence. He had Min filing at 3 in the morning and Hae-won tracing a call, and 3 sources still in place who didn't yet know they'd been found. He had a folder of timestamps and an evidentiary chain, and a woman who had walked into the most dangerous situation of her life, not because she had to, but because she had chosen to, and who was looking at him right now with the same steadiness she'd had in that crosswalk back in November. "Yes," he said. And somewhere in Seattle, a phone was being traced back to its origin point, and a woman who had built her entire plan around the certainty that Imani Rochelle Mercer would run was beginning to understand for the first time and far too late that she had fundamentally misread. The trace came back in 22 minutes. Hae-won called at 3:14 in the morning and gave Kang-hyeon an address in Belltown, a serviced apartment building 6 blocks from the waterfront, the kind of place that rented by the week, and asked nothing except a credit card that Hae-won's team had already walked back through 2 intermediary accounts to a name that was not Yoon Seola, but was hers nonetheless. Kang-hyeon wrote the address down on the back of a receipt from Imani's kitchen counter. He looked at it for a moment. Then he looked at Imani, who was watching him from the reading chair with the particular quality of attention she had been directing at him all night. Not suspicious, not hopeful, just honest, waiting to see what he would do with information when no one was making him do the right thing with it. "She's 6 blocks from the water," he said. He put the receipt on the coffee table between them, address facing up. "Belltown. She's been there for at least 3 weeks based on the lease." Imani looked at the receipt, then at him. "What are you going to do?" "Nothing tonight." He said it before he'd consciously decided it, and then he sat with it and found it was true. "Min files at 3. The court opens at 8. What I need is for the legal process to start running before she knows how much ground she's lost." He paused. "If I move on that address tonight, she knows. She burns what she has left and runs, and we spend months trying to reassemble the case. So we wait. We wait." He looked at her. "Can you sleep?" She thought about it honestly. "Probably not." "Then tell me something." She looked at him. "Tell you what?" "Anything. Something that doesn't have anything to do with Seola or the filing or any of it." He leaned back against the couch. Something I don't know about the last 7 months. She was quiet for a moment. Something shifted in her face, not softening exactly, more like the decision to allow something that had been held at a careful distance. I took a ceramics class, she said. He blinked. Ceramics? There's a studio 4 blocks from here. They do evening classes on Thursdays. She looked at her hands. I was terrible at it. I made a bowl that looked like something a child made on a dare. The instructor said it had character. A slight pause. I signed up for the next session. He looked at her hands, at the way she was turning them slightly, looking at them. Did you go back? He said. 3 times. Then I got too big to sit comfortably at the wheel. She glanced up. But I kept the bowl. It's in the kitchen cabinet, behind the good mugs. He thought about that bowl, about the Thursday evenings she had spent in a studio 4 blocks from her apartment, learning something entirely new in a city she had moved to alone and frightened, and had kept going back to even when it was hard, even when the thing she made looked wrong. I should have been here, he said. She looked at him steadily. You're here now. It wasn't absolution, it wasn't even close, but it was accurate, and accuracy from Imani had always been the thing he trusted most. They sat in the quiet apartment until past 4. She talked a little more. The ceramics instructor's name was Barbara, and she was 67 and had opinions about everything. The neighbor across the hall played guitar badly and apologetically at odd hours. The grocery store 3 blocks over had the best produce in the neighborhood, but the worst checkout line management she had ever encountered in any city. He listened to all of it. He did not look at his phone once. At 4:30, she fell asleep in the reading chair with the blanket pulled up and her head at an angle that was going to hurt when she woke up. And he sat on the couch and watched her breathe and thought about how he had spent 2 decades building structures designed to outlast him. And the only structure that had ever mattered was the one he'd walked away from in a conference room in March, while telling himself it was sacrifice. At 5:53, his phone vibrated silently. Mine. A single text. Filed. Confirmation number attached. Emergency hearing scheduled 9 a.m. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he looked at Imani sleeping. He typed back, "Thank you. Tell me when you have the direct connection to Seola's identity." He put the phone down and waited for morning. She woke at 6:40 with a sharp intake of breath and one hand flying to her neck before she processed where she was and relaxed it. "You stayed," she said. Her voice was rough with sleep. "You were asleep. You could have left." "I know." He stood. "I'll make coffee. Don't get up fast." "I know how to get up from a chair, Kang-hyeon." "I know you do." He was already in the kitchen. "I'm making coffee anyway." He found the coffee, found the wrong coffee first, then the right one, found the grinder and made too much noise with it, and heard her make a sound from the living room that was either complaint or amusement, and he didn't ask which. He brought her a cup. She was sitting up in the chair with both feet on the floor, a hand pressed to the small of her back, doing the calculation that pregnant women do every morning about what the day is going to cost physically. She took the cup. "Minfield," he said. 9 a.m. hearing. She absorbed this. "Okay. I'm going to go change. Come back before 8. He paused. "Unless you'd rather I didn't." She looked at him over the rim of the cup. "Come back before 8. He left. He drove to his house in 15 minutes, showered, changed, stood in the closet for 30 seconds longer than necessary because the house felt different at 6 in the morning after a night like that. Too large, too still, too full of the specific silence of a place that had been built for more people than currently occupied it. He came back at 7:40. She had changed too. Different sweater, hair pulled back, the folder from the coffee table in her hands, going through it one more time with a pencil making small notations in the margins. "Min is going to need the originals," she said without looking up. "He has copies. He'll need the originals for the hearing. I'll bring them." She made another notation. "I'm coming to the hearing." He started to speak. She looked up. He closed his mouth. "I'm the complainant in the harassment documentation," she said. "My name is on half of what Min is filing. The judge is going to want to understand who built this file and why, and I can explain it better than Min can." She held his gaze. "And I'm not 8 months pregnant yet. I'm still 34 weeks. I can sit in a courtroom." "I know you can." "Then stop deciding whether to argue with me." "I wasn't—" "You were doing the breathing thing." She tapped her own chest slightly. You breathe differently when you're deciding whether to override me. She went back to the folder. You've been doing it our whole marriage. I just never told you I noticed. He sat down. He thought about all the times he had done that breathing and all the decisions that had followed it. I'm sorry, he said. She looked up again, slower this time. For what specifically? She said. Not hostile, genuine question. For the marriage. For the way I ran it. For deciding what you needed without consulting you and calling it protection. He looked at his hands. For March. She was quiet for a moment. I know you thought it was right, she said. It doesn't matter what I thought. It mattered what it did. She held the folder in her lap and looked at him for a long time. The morning light was coming through the window now, pale and gray and Seattle-specific, and it fell across her face at an angle that showed every line of the tiredness and the 7 months of doing hard things alone. I spent 4 months being furious at you, she said, and then I spent 2 months trying to decide if the fury was justified or if I was just in pain and needed somewhere to put it. She looked down at the folder. And then I spent 1 month figuring out that it was both, and that both things could be true at the same time, and that being right about why I was angry didn't mean I wasn't also just missing you. He didn't say anything. I missed you, she said, plainly, without decoration. I hated you and I missed you and I was building a case against a woman trying to destroy my life. And some nights I'd sit in that reading chair and think about the way you used to fall asleep on the couch with the TV on, and I'd feel it like a bruise. She paused. That's not romantic. That's just true. I know, he said. I missed you the same way, the kind that isn't clean. She looked at him for another moment, then she stood up. We need to go. The courthouse was 15 minutes away. Min met them in the lobby at 8:45. A trim man in a gray suit who had the careful posture of someone who spent his days in rooms where language was a weapon, and who looked at Imani when they arrived with an expression of professional reassessment. You built this file, he said to her. Not a question. Most of it. The timestamp cross-referencing is excellent work. He said it without condescension, genuine professional recognition. The judge is going to want to understand how you track the correlation between message receipt times and your proximity to Kang-hyeon linked locations. I can explain it. Good. He glanced at Kang-hyeon briefly. Haewon sent the audio forensics at 7. The analysis is clean. The edit points in the video's audio track are identifiable with high confidence. I've had it reviewed by an independent forensic audio firm already. He paused. The Portland firm representing the opposing motion has been notified of the emergency hearing. They haven't responded yet. They will, Kang-hyeon said. Undoubtedly. Min looked at his briefcase. One more thing. The direct link to Seola's identity. I have it. Both of them looked at him. Park Hyun-seok, my former paralegal, opened a new email account 3 weeks ago. He used it to send a document to the Portland firm. The document was one of the fabricated account records. Min's voice was precise and unhurried. The email account was registered to a phone number. The phone number matches the one that called Miss Mercer at 2:31 this morning. The lobby was quiet around them. She called Imani from the same phone her own source used to transmit documents, Kang-hyeon said. She got sloppy, Imani said, quietly, not triumphant, just accurate. She got scared, Min said, and scared people reuse infrastructure. He adjusted his briefcase. Shall we? The hearing room was smaller than Kang-hyeon had expected. He had been in courtrooms before, in the background, watching other people's problems get adjudicated, but always with the particular insulation of someone powerful enough to remain peripheral. Today he sat at a table and Imani sat beside him, and Min stood, and the judge was a woman in her late 50s named Carmichael, who had the eyes of someone who had heard every variation of every argument and had stopped being impressed by any of them. The Portland firm had sent an attorney by phone, a voice from a speaker on the opposing table. Judge Carmichael looked at Min's filing for 4 minutes without speaking. Then she looked up. Counsel, she said to the speaker, your client's motion alleges asset concealment during the original settlement proceedings. The respondent has filed an emergency counter-motion alleging the supporting documentation is fabricated. I'm looking at a forensic audio analysis, a shell company trace, and a document chain that runs from your filing back through a defunct paralegal position at Respondent's Counsel's firm. She paused. Does your client have anything to say about the reference number in the header of Exhibit C? A silence from the speaker. Counsel, she said again. Your Honor, we would need time to review. You've had the countermotion for 4 hours. She set the filing down. I'm going to be direct. The documentation your client submitted bears internal formatting markers traceable to a specific law office's filing system. The individual who left that office 8 months ago has been identified as the source of the transmission, and the phone number used to transmit that document is directly linked to the individual your client appears to be acting on behalf of. She looked at Min. Do you want to speak to the harassment documentation? Min spoke for 11 minutes. He was precise and unhurried, and he let Imani's folder do most of the talking. The timestamps, the cross-references, the pattern that built itself over 4 months of messages into something that was unambiguous in its intent. Halfway through, the attorney on the speaker asked to call his client. You can call whoever you like, Judge Carmichael said. After. When Min finished, she looked at the folder for another moment. Ms. Mercer, she said, this documentation, you compiled this yourself? Yes, Your Honor. Starting when? The second message. I didn't document the first because I didn't know there would be a second. She paused. After the second one, I started keeping records. The judge looked at her for a moment. Something moved behind her professional composure. Not sympathy, exactly. More like recognition of a specific kind of competence. The opposing motion is stayed pending full forensic examination of the submitted documentation, Judge Carmichael said. I'm also referring the fabrication question to the district attorney's office. If the forensic analysis holds, and based on what I'm looking at, I expect it will, your client is looking at charges that go considerably beyond civil harassment. She looked at the speaker. I'd suggest your client retain criminal counsel. The speaker was quiet. The hearing lasted 40 minutes total. They walked out into the gray Seattle morning and stood on the courthouse steps, and Min said he would call when the DA's office made contact, and then he walked to his car with the particular briskness of a man who had work to do and was already thinking about it. Kang-hyeon and Imani stood on the steps. She had the folder in her hands. She looked at it for a moment, then down at the street below the steps. Is it over? She said. The motion is over. The case she built? It's over. He looked at the street with her. She's still out there, but she's out there with a DA referral and a forensic examination and no legal avenue left. And the 3 sources. Daewon Bae, Park Hyun-seok. He said the names evenly. I'm going to handle that today. Not the way I would have handled it a year ago. She looked at him. Properly, he said. With documentation and termination, and in Bae's case and Park's fact, the DA already has what they need. Daewon, he paused. Daewon made his choices for his brother. I understand the mechanism, even if it doesn't change what it cost. He was quiet for a moment. He's out, but I won't destroy him. She was quiet. Is that enough? He said. It's the right thing, she said. Whether it's enough is a separate question. He looked at her. What would be enough? She thought about it honestly, the way she thought about everything, without performing the consideration, just actually doing it. You, she said finally. Being different in the specific ways you said you would be, and not just in the emergency, but in the ordinary. She looked at the street. Because emergencies are easy. You've always been good in emergencies. It's the Tuesday mornings that are hard. He thought about the Tuesday calls, about calling before 8, about the 6-minute conversation, and the 4-minute one after that, and the one where she had asked him the real reason for March, and he had given it to her. I know, he said. I know you know. She shifted the folder to her other hand. That's why I'm still standing here. She was quiet for a moment. I want to go home, she said. I want tea, and I want to sit in my chair, and I want to not think about any of this for at least an hour. Okay? And then I want you to come back at 6, and we're going to have dinner that isn't hospital food or 4 in the morning tea. He looked at her. You're going to cook at 34 weeks. I'm going to direct you while you cook. She looked at him. You're going to follow directions. I'll try. You'll do better than try. Something crossed her face, not quite a smile, adjacent to one. You're not a man who fails at things he decides to do, Kang-hyeon. You just have to actually decide. She went down the steps. He watched her go and then followed. He dropped her at her building and drove to his office. the real one, and spent 4 hours doing what he had said he would do. He called Daewon in first. He sat across from a man he had known for 11 years and watched him understand from Kang-hyeon's face that the calculation was already done. Daewon didn't make excuses. He sat straight in the chair and said his brother was out of debt and he would do it again, which Kang-hyeon actually respected, even as he said the words that ended 11 years in a single sentence. He made Daewon sign documentation that was less punishing than it could have been and more restrictive than Daewon had hoped. And that was the compromise between what the old Kang-hyeon would have done and what doing nothing would have cost. Bai was handled through Haewon with documentation passed to the DA's contact that Min provided. Park Hyun-seok was already in the wind. He'd apparently left his apartment that morning, which meant he'd been warned. Kang-hyeon let it go. The DA had what they needed, and the man was not worth the chase. He called Min at 2. The DA's office called, Min said. They're opening a criminal investigation into the fabricated documentation and the harassment pattern. They're also looking at the Belltown address. She'll be gone. Probably. But gone is different from finished. She used real infrastructure, real accounts, real people, real document trails. Those don't disappear because she does. Min paused. It's going to take time, but she can't hide the way she was hiding before. Every channel she used is now a record. And the legal motion. Dead. Formally dismissed pending forensic review, which is a formality at this point. Min's voice carried something that in another man might have been satisfaction, but in Min expressed itself only as the absence of tension. Your financial records are not at risk. And the operational exposure. The 3 sources she had were inside long enough to observe patterns and logistics. But observation without documentation is testimony, and testimony requires people willing to testify. Min paused. Daewon isn't going to testify against you. He signed agreements this morning that make that clear. Bai is cooperating with the DA on Seola, not on you. He doesn't have anything that rises to criminal exposure for your organization specifically, and Park is gone. Another pause. You're not clean, but you're not exposed. Kang-hyeon sat at his desk and looked at the city through the window he rarely used. Thank you, Jae-sung, he said. He used the given name, which he almost never did. Min was quiet for a moment. Take care of your family, he said, and hung up. Kang-hyeon sat at his desk for 20 more minutes. Then he opened the bottom drawer and pulled out a folder he had assembled in February, before the divorce, before March, before any of this had taken the shape it had taken. He had put it together quietly, without telling Min or Haewon or anyone, in the particular way of a man who makes decisions alone and has always made decisions alone and tells himself that's strength. The folder contained the documentation for a trust, an independent financial structure tied to no entity connected to his name in any way that could be reversed or reclaimed. Funded, clean, designed to function regardless of what happened to him. He had put Imani's name on it in February and then signed the divorce papers in March, and had told himself he would tell her when the time was right, and then had not told her because the time being right required him to be in her life, and he had removed himself from her life. He put the folder in his coat pocket. He bought groceries on the way to her apartment. He didn't know what he was making. He stood in the produce section of the store with good produce and terrible checkout lines and thought about what she might want, and then called Nari. What does she eat? He said when Nari picked up. A pause. Is this a question about Imani? Yes? You're cooking. I'm attempting it. He heard Nari make a sound that took him a moment to identify as relief. Not about the cooking specifically, about the reason behind it. She loves pasta, Nari said. Simple, nothing fancy, and she's been craving anything with lemon for about 2 months. A pause. And Kang-hyeon? Don't make it perfect. She'll trust it more if it's slightly wrong. He bought pasta and lemons and things he understood, and one thing he wasn't sure about, and went to her building and rang the buzzer at 5:58. She buzzed him up. The apartment smelled like her tea, and the particular combination of things that made it her space, and not a space that had been constructed for comfort by someone else's decisions. He put the groceries on the counter and looked at her kitchen for a moment, at the unfamiliar arrangement of things, the wrong cabinet, and the right tea, and somewhere behind the good mugs, a ceramic bowl that looked like something a child made on a dare. She appeared in the kitchen doorway in different clothes again, comfortable ones this time, The kind people wear when they've decided the performance is over for the day. You actually bought groceries, she said. You said dinner. I thought you'd get takeout. Nari said you like pasta. She looked at him. Something in her face did the thing it had been doing all day. The small recalibrations, the adjustments of a person who is getting used to expecting something and having it arrive. When did you call Nari? Produce section. I didn't know what you wanted. She was quiet for a moment. Okay, she said. She moved to the kitchen table and sat down. What do you need? A large pan. Where's your second cabinet from the left? Bottom shelf. She watched him find it. You need the pasta water salted. I know that. You didn't move like you knew that. I was looking for the salt. Above the stove. He found the salt. He found the right burner. He made mistakes with the heat and corrected them, and made a different mistake with the pasta timing and corrected that too. And she sat at the kitchen table the entire time watching him work through an unfamiliar kitchen with the expression of someone observing something they find specifically and unexpectedly moving. He plated it. It was slightly overdone. The lemon was too much, and then he added more butter to correct it, and it was better but not right, and he brought it to the table and sat down across from her. She took a bite. She chewed. She didn't say anything for a moment. It's okay, she said. Nari said not to make it perfect. Nari was right. She took another bite. It's actually okay. Like genuinely okay. It's overdone. A little. She looked at him. I don't mind. They ate in the quiet of the apartment. Outside, Seattle was doing its early evening thing, the shift from day gray to night gray, the lights starting to show in windows, the city settling into the part of the day where it stopped pretending to be somewhere else. He put the folder on the table when she finished. She looked at it, then at him. What is this? She said. Open it. She opened it. She read slowly. She always read slowly, completely, from the beginning. He waited. She turned 2 pages, read the third, turned it over. She looked at the amount. She set the folder down. February, she said. Yes. Before March. Yes. You built this before you signed the papers. I built it when I was trying to decide whether to sign them, when I was telling myself that removing you was protection. He looked at the table. I wanted you to have something that wasn't contingent on me, that couldn't be taken back if I died or if everything collapsed or if... He stopped. I should have told you. I kept not telling you because telling you meant being in your life, and I had decided I shouldn't be. She looked at the folder for a moment. It has no conditions, she said. No. It doesn't require me to... Oh, there's nothing in there that requires you to do anything. He looked at her. It was never supposed to be leverage. It was supposed to be the opposite of leverage. She was quiet for a long moment. You should have told me, she said. I know. In February, before the conference room. She looked at him. If I had known you built this in February, the conference room might have been a different conversation. He sat with that, with the weight of what might have been different and the understanding that it didn't change what had actually happened, which was the version they were living. I know, he said again. She looked at the folder. Then she closed it. She pushed it back across the table toward him. He looked at it. I don't want it like this, she said. I want you to put that in front of an attorney. A different one. Not Min, someone with no connection to any of your structures. And I want them to restructure it so my name is on it without yours anywhere in the documentation. She met his eyes. Not because I don't trust you, because I need it to be actually independent. Not a gift. Not something built from your side of things. He looked at the folder. That's going to take... I know how long it's going to take. She looked at him steadily. I'm not going anywhere. He looked at her. She looked back. Outside the window, the city did its quiet thing. Somewhere down the hall, the neighbor's guitar started up. Badly, apologetically, some half-recognized chord that went wrong in the middle, and stopped and tried again. I want to ask you something, she said. Ask. The empire. The operational side. She held his gaze. What are you going to do with it? He had been thinking about this since the hospital, since the parking structure, since the courthouse steps this morning. He had been thinking about it since February, if he was honest, since the moment he had sat down to build a trust for a woman he loved and understood, in the building of it, that he was protecting her from himself as much as from anything external. "I've been in it for 20 years, he said. "The legitimate side, the shipping, the properties, those are real businesses. They employ real people. I understand how to run them." He paused. "The other side, the things that aren't clean." He looked at the table. "They take more than they give. I knew that already. I've known it for years." He looked up. "I just never had a reason that outweighed the cost of walking away." She was quiet. "Jalen is a reason," he said. She absorbed that. "Walking away isn't a thing you do overnight," she said carefully. "No, it takes time. It takes restructuring things, letting certain arrangements expire, moving people into legitimate roles or separating from them." He paused. "It's not a clean exit, but it can be a real one." "How long?" "Honestly, a year, maybe 18 months before the operational side is genuinely dormant." He looked at her. "Not the answer you were hoping for." "It's an honest answer." She looked at the window. "I've spent 7 months living with the consequences of you managing information. I'll take an honest answer over a comfortable one." She looked back at him. "Can you do it without—" She stopped. "Can you walk away without turning it into one last control play? One last version of deciding everything alone?" He thought about it. "I don't know," he said. She blinked slightly. "That's the first time you've said that to me," she said. "I know. In our whole marriage." "I know." He looked at her. "I'm going to try to do it the right way. I might make mistakes. I'm almost certainly going to default to my instincts sometimes before I catch myself." He paused. "But I'm going to try in front of you, not where you can't see it." She was quiet for a long moment. The guitar down the hall tried the chord again, got it slightly more right, stopped, satisfied. "Stay tonight," she said. He looked at her. "Not—" She shook her head slightly. "Just stay. Couch is fine." She looked at the window. "I'm tired of the apartment being quiet after things happen." He stayed. He slept on the couch under a blanket she brought him without ceremony, and woke at 4 in the morning to the particular stillness of the apartment, and lay there looking at the ceiling and listening to her breathe from the other room. He thought about all the things that still had to happen. The DA's investigation. The 18 months of careful unwinding. The attorney for the trust. The conversations with Nari and with Haewon, and the smaller, harder conversations that would happen in ordinary time, over bad pasta and grocery runs and Tuesday phone calls that no longer needed to happen before 8 because they were no longer the only channel between them. He thought about the bowl behind the good mugs. In the morning she made coffee, and he did not comment on the process or offer to help. And they sat at the kitchen table with the gray November light coming through the window, and she had one hand around her mug and the other resting on the curve of her stomach, and she looked out the window at nothing in particular with the expression of someone who has set something down and is noticing the absence of its weight. "He's moving," she said. He looked at her hand. "He does it in the morning," she said. "Every morning, like he's checking in." She looked at him across the table. "You want to—" She stopped, recalibrated. "Do you want to feel him move?" He put his hand out. She placed it over hers on the curve of her stomach, palm flat, and they waited. 30 seconds. 40. Then something moved under his hand, a small definitive motion, the movement of a person who exists entirely and completely and has opinions about mornings. He looked at his hand. He looked at her. She was watching him with an expression he had no previous experience of, not from her, not in their marriage, not in any of the conversations or confrontations, or the long Tuesday calls, or the crosswalk in November. It was the expression of someone who has decided something is worth the risk of it and is watching to see whether they were right. He did not try to say anything. Some things get ruined by language. He just kept his hand where it was and felt his son move through the morning, through the ordinary light, through the coffee and the quiet, and the sound of the city beginning to wake up outside the window of a small apartment that Imani had built carefully and alone and had decided, after everything, to let him into. 6 weeks later, Min called to say the DA's office had located Yoon Seol-ah in Vancouver. She had crossed the border the morning after the phone call, the morning after the hearing, after the forensic evidence had begun its examination, after the plan she had built for over a year had been submitted to people who were not interested in her version of events. She was arrested on charges of criminal harassment, fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The case was clean. The evidence Min had built required nothing from Kang-hyeon's organization and exposed nothing that hadn't already been documented through legitimate channels. Park Hyun-seok was found in Portland 3 weeks later. He cooperated fully and immediately, which was the behavior of someone who had been frightened for months and was relieved to be done with it. Daewon moved to Busan. Kang-hyeon heard this through Nari and did not investigate further. The trust was restructured by an attorney. Imani found herself, a woman named Patricia Chen who had an office in Capitol Hill and no connection to anyone in Kang-hyeon's world, and who read the original documentation and said it was structurally sound and just needed the right hands on it. Imani sat across from Patricia and signed her own name to something that belonged entirely to her and felt the specific satisfaction of a thing completed on her own terms. Kang-hyeon began the process he had said he would begin. It was not clean. It was not fast. There were nights when he made calls he shouldn't have made, and mornings when he caught himself organizing information in the old pattern before he noticed what he was doing and stopped. He told Imani when that happened. Not every time, but more times than he would have predicted. She did not reward him for telling her. She noted it, and they moved forward. That was the version of things he had not known to want. Not absolution, not the easy confirmation that change was happening, just the ordinary friction of two people trying to build something honest from materials that had been shaped by years of dishonesty. Jalen Seo Mercer was born on a Tuesday morning in February. He was loud and had opinions from the first minute, and the nurses said he was perfect, and Imani said he was perfect, and Kang-hyeon held him for the first time standing next to the hospital bed with Imani's hand in his, and thought that perfect was not exactly the right word. Perfect was the word for things that couldn't be broken. This was better than perfect. This was real. A small, real person with a specific face and specific sounds, and a future that was going to be complicated and difficult and full of things neither of his parents could predict or control. Kang-hyeon liked that. He had spent his life trying to control the future. This particular future was beyond him. He found, standing in that hospital room with the February morning coming through the window and his son's weight in his arms and his ex-wife watching him from the bed, that beyond him was where he wanted to be. The morning they brought Jalen home, Kang-hyeon made pancakes. He made them badly, with smoke and the wrong heat, and one that slid off the pan in a shape that was genuinely concerning, and Imani sat at the kitchen table with Jalen in the crook of her arm and watched him work through the disaster of it with an expression that was mostly amusement and partly something she wasn't naming. He put a plate in front of her. The pancakes were slightly burned on one edge and too pale on the other. She ate them. "They're terrible," she said. "I know. You can't cook. I'm learning. You need to learn faster." She looked at the plate, then at him. "They're also fine. I'm eating them." He sat down across from her. Jalen made the sound he made when he was about to decide he was hungry, and Imani shifted him and looked out the window at the morning. "We should talk about the house," she said. Not the apartment. The house. The conversation they had been having in fragments for 6 weeks about what permanently looked like and where. "Okay," he said. "I have conditions." "Tell me." "I pick it," she said. "We look together. I make the final call." He thought about all the properties he owned, all the structures he had built and purchased and selected with security metrics and sightlines and controlled access in mind. "Okay," he said, "and it needs to be near Barbara's ceramics studio." She looked at him. "I'm going back in the spring." "Okay." "And there needs to be a room that isn't an office or a nursery or anything functional." She looked at the window. "Just a room, with light. That doesn't have a purpose yet." He thought about that room. About the particular luxury of a space that hadn't been assigned a function, that existed in the patience of not yet knowing what it would become. "Okay," he said. She looked at him. He looked at her. The phone on the counter vibrated once. He looked at it. A number he recognized, one of the remaining operational contacts, someone from that side of his life making a routine call. He looked at Jalen and asleep in the crook of Imani's arm. He reached over and turned the phone face down. Imani watched him do it. She said nothing. She didn't need to. Outside the window, Seattle was doing what Seattle does in February, gray and steady and patient, with a quality of light that wasn't bright but was honest, the kind of light that shows things exactly as they are without flattering any of it. Inside the apartment that was almost not their apartment anymore, Kang-hyeon sat across from his family and drank bad coffee and thought about nothing in particular. For a man who had spent 20 years thinking about everything all at once, it was the most unfamiliar feeling he had ever had. He decided he could get used to it.